Welcome. Today's hangout, Tyler Hogan, the president of Bright Ideas Press, is going to be discussing how we can help kids manage their emotions. And P.S. Parents, this is going to help you manage your emotions too. We all have emotions, and so this is a topic that's relevant to every single person, no matter how old you are. And Tyler has some great things to share with us. So, Tyler, we're going to dig right in, and I'm going to ask you first off, why is this an important topic?
Well, because it's something that everybody deals with. Everybody, like you said, everybody has emotions. And if you're a parent, your kids are going to have emotions, and you're going to have to be the one to teach them how to handle those. Sometimes emotions can be intense. Sometimes they can be powerful. Sometimes they can be destructive. And as parents, we're the ones who get to teach our kids, here's what to do when you have feelings, whether they're good feelings or bad feelings or strong feelings or any of those. We're the ones who need to shape our kids' worldview when it comes to how to handle that. God gave us hearts for a reason, and this is actually a huge gap, I think, in what Christians in the church discuss regularly. You know, unless you are a Christian counselor or hang around a bunch of Christian counselors, there's not really a whole lot of mainstream teaching on this. So I think this is a really important topic for all of us parents to, I was going to say get under our belts, but that to start learning about and start practicing ourselves, because it is a long process, not just something
So,
that you grab and master.
So tell us about this process. How do we learn to process our emotions? What are the steps we take?
Well, first off, let me give a quick disclaimer. I'm not a counselor myself or a mental health professional or anything like that. I'm just a dad who's learned some things about myself and about my family, and I think that other people will find them helpful as well. So that legalese disclaimer out of the way, I have 5 steps that I've learned over the past few years that have really helped me a lot, and that I've found to be helpful with my kids. And the first step is just to welcome emotions, because God made emotions. Emotions are good things, even the hard ones, even the unpleasant ones. You know, we tend to think of joy and happiness and peace and contentment as the good emotions, and anger and sadness and grief and disappointment as bad emotions. And I think we need to make a distinction between unpleasant emotions and bad emotions. Even God says it's better to be in the house of mourning than the house of feasting. So he made the negative emotions too, and he made them for a reason. Both the pleasant ones and the unpleasant ones are for our good. I think there's a lot of stoicism that has crept into not just the church, but Western culture as a whole. You know, we bottle up emotions, we deny them, and when we do that, we're basically just throwing a gift that God gave us back in his face. So we need to start by telling kids, hey, it's okay to have feelings. It's okay to feel frustrated at this math lesson, or I know you weren't able to go to the zoo like you wanted to, and it's okay to be disappointed about that. You know, we need to not treat emotions as if they're something bad that we need to avoid. The second step is to name the emotions. And this is particularly important, I would say, for boys. And that may not be politically correct, but I think building an emotional vocabulary is something that a lot of people just completely skip over with boys. The more specific you can get with how you name your emotions, the better you'll be able to deal with them. When you know what you're dealing with, you understand what triggers it, and you can develop a plan to process them more effectively. So ask your kids to name more emotions, and the more specific, the better. There's a difference between sadness and disappointment, between anger and frustration, or between happiness and contentment. Those are all different things. So the more specific you can get, the better. I remember when I was about 6 years old, and my mom woke me up one morning. She's a very spontaneous person, and she said, "Tyler, guess what? We're going to the zoo today." And I burst into tears. 6 years old. I mean, she was expecting I would be thrilled, but there I was, I was bawling, just woken up. And my mother, being the wonderful person that she is, helped me to, she's like, "Okay, Tyler, why are you crying? What's going on here?" And I mean, at 6 years old, I didn't have a great emotional vocabulary, but she was able to help draw out of me, I am upset that I didn't have any warning about going to the zoo. Mom's spontaneous. I'm not. I need warning. I need time to mentally fortify myself before I leave the house. So I was upset about that. I was anxious about going to a new place. I mean, that zoo is not somewhere that I had been before or hadn't been in a really long time. So I was anxious about going there. I was disappointed that the things I had planned for today, I wasn't going to be able to do them anymore. So figuring out those words, disappointed, anxious, upset, and finding out what exactly was triggering all of those helped her to process those emotions with me. I don't remember if we actually went to the zoo or not, but it did change her approach. She always let me know at least a day ahead of time if we were going to be making any big trips, and that helped a lot. If she had just kept on doing spontaneous things like that, that would have been really stressful for me. And granted, that's just because I was, crazy and very different than my mom, different kind of crazy than my mom, but those emotion words were really important for us. So welcoming emotions, naming them, identifying the trigger, because emotions come from somewhere, and if you notice where it comes from, you can deal with it better. And sometimes it's not clear. Sometimes emotions masquerade as other emotions. Maybe you're sad, but it's coming out looking like anger. Sometimes the trigger has absolutely nothing to do with anything. The issue isn't the issue. I'm angry about X is what I say, but really there's something completely different going on, and I'm just using X as my reason to be angry. And dealing with X isn't going to solve it. You have to find out what the root issue really is. My oldest daughter was giving my wife and I some attitude recently about doing chores. I know, shocker. Not like any of your kids ever do that. And we thought, she's just being lazy. She's got a chore chart, and we would ask her to do something that wasn't on the chore chart, and she would just get really huffy about it and just feel so betrayed and used. And we're like, what is this all about? I mean, because she can work hard. We've seen it before. So in talking with her, we found out it's not just that she's being lazy. She saw the chore chart as being like a work contract. And imagine if your boss suddenly gave you all kinds of tasks that weren't in your job description, how would you feel? Possibly very upset about it and feeling maybe a little betrayed and, this isn't what I signed up for, that kind of thing. And that's what she was feeling, because she thought that our chore chart that we had worked together on and put up on the refrigerator, that was her job description. So we had to have a conversation about there's more that you will have to do in your life than just what goes on the chart. Sometimes you just got to do other things. And she needed some way to process that feeling with us. And I mean, there's still not great joy and celebration when we ask her to do new chores, but it's better than it was before because she now knows what the expectations are. So identifying the trigger was hugely influential in how we dealt with those emotions. If we had just thought she was being lazy, well, pile on more chores. That'll solve it. She'll develop a work ethic and then everything will be fine. But that wasn't the issue. So if you don't identify the right trigger, you could be solving the wrong problem.
That is super helpful. So what's our next step after we find the triggers?
Next, you need to listen to the emotions. And this is not the same as acting on them, but you have to hear it out. Because emotions have jobs. Emotions are messengers. And I think this is one of the big reasons why God gave us emotions. They're useful. Every emotion is a messenger that's supposed to tell us something important. And oftentimes they're telling us something about ourselves. If I'm feeling angry, that might be revealing, hey, I have a goal here that's being blocked. And I might not even have known that I had a goal over here. But the fact that I'm getting angry tells me this is really important to me. If I'm feeling sad or grief over a loss, that can also tell me something about something I really value. We moved last year from one house to another house, and I remember as we were cleaning out the old house, I was just feeling so sad. And it was just an across-town move. It's not like we were leaving people behind, but it was the first house that my wife and I had ever bought. We had 3 of our kids in that house. It was, I mean, there were a lot of great memories attached to it. And I just remember trying to process that sadness and think, I mean, there's nothing special about these walls. What is it that's really making me so sad about this? And as I was reflecting and introspecting, it was telling me that I have a lot of memories here that are really important to me, good times that I've had with my family. Those are important to me. And I was really worried that I wasn't going to be able to replicate those in the new house. I was worried that things were changing too much, too quickly, and that the memories that I was going to make with my family weren't going to be as good. And part of that was a really legitimate fear, because I had allowed myself to get into a rut of busyness and not spending the time with my kids that I had been spending when they were really little. And we had 4 kids now, and that's just insanity, because our house is crazy and it's hard to get things done. And so you wind up spending more and more time on chores and logistics and less time just playing around with your kids. So that sadness was a messenger to me that I need to make sure, I need to be intentional about spending that time with my kids and with my wife, and building new good memories. It wasn't that I was leaving old memories behind. Those memories were still with me. They were still good, but I needed to be sure that I was intentional about building new ones. So that was a message that I needed to hear out. So whether it's anger or sadness or happiness, happiness can reveal things that you like. If you find yourself getting happy and you don't know why, look at what is actually making you happy, and maybe your life could stand some more of that. If it's not a bad thing that's making you happy. Loneliness, that can reveal our need to be loved by God, by other people. If we're feeling lonely, maybe we haven't been investing the time that we need to in our relationships, or spending the time with God that we ought to. If we're getting defensive, that might be revealing a soft spot in our ego. And that can bear some introspection too. Now, I mean, I say all of these emotions, a lot of our emotions, honestly, have physiological messages rather than psychological ones. So you don't have to go completely shrink on a couch with every emotion that you have. Sometimes it's just saying, I'm tired. I need a good night's sleep. Or I'm hungry and I'm hangry. Or I'm thirsty. I mean, we're almost always thirsty. How many of us actually drink the recommended, 80 gallons of water a day that we're supposed to be getting? And that has an impact on our mood and on our feelings. Or maybe we're eating something that we're allergic to, or something that's actually kind of poisoning us, like sugar does. You give sugar to my kids, that's it. Crazy things start happening within minutes, because their bodies are tiny and they take sugar and they process it and they get hyper so fast. So it's not that it's a behavioral problem. It's just that, yep, they had too many Tootsie Rolls today, right before bed. That was clever of us. So you have to pay attention to whether it's a physiological message or a psychological message, or something else. And honestly, what I have found when I first started processing emotions was that it was a huge revealer of idols for me. I have all of these idols. The human heart is an idol factory. I think that was Spurgeon. So our emotions, when they reveal things that are important to us, whether it's coming out in anger or happiness or sadness or depression or what have you, sometimes that's just revealing our idols and telling us, hey, you care about this, and you might care about this way too much, So in terms of how we apply that, asking questions of our kids like, what does this feeling make you want to do? What would make you feel differently? What is this emotion telling you is what we're driving at. And sometimes you need to ask physical diagnostic questions like, well, did you get enough sleep last night? What have you had to eat today? You have to be careful with those questions, because you don't want to sound condescending. You don't want to deny the validity of the emotion just because it has a physical origin. But sometimes you need to do that kind of emotional troubleshooting too. And then the last step is evaluate and act. So one thing that I had to learn is that emotions will always tell us to do something, that we want something to happen. But an emotion should always propel us to a positive action. So, for instance, when talking about being sad at moving, my sadness prompted a positive action of spend more intentional time with your kids. So that's a good thing, right? That's a good way to deal with that kind of sadness. My daughter's frustration at the chore chart, a good thing is to adjust her expectations. If I'm feeling disappointed that my friend canceled our get together that I was really looking forward to, the positive action is to take initiative and reschedule it. Don't just sit there feeling sad. Do something about it. Make it happen. It's a good thing. You should go for that. Or if I had a conversation with my wife and I felt hurt afterwards, the positive action is first to forgive and then to go and discuss it with her. Don't just sit on it. The Jesus is saying, don't let the sun go down on your anger, I think can apply to a lot of different emotions. We don't want to just sit on those things that can cause us to be irritable and cause sin. And it's not that the anger itself is the problem or the hurt itself is the problem, but wallowing when you could be taking a positive action, that's what we want to avoid. And sometimes we need to recognize that the positive action is take no action. If I'm angry that my wife needed to have a long conversation about something deeply emotional when I was trying to watch TV, the right thing to do is to listen to that conversation, hear her out, talk about whatever it is, and then just remember, my show's on Netflix. I can watch it later. That's not the most important thing right now. Reprioritize. That's especially important with feelings of anger. Sometimes the anger propels us to a positive action in the sense that, if my boss scheduled me to work on days that I had already scheduled and gotten approval to take off, and my wife and I had plans, I might feel very angry that he scheduled me. And the positive action isn't to do nothing. It's to go and have a conversation with my boss, get it sorted out, find a compromise, figure out somebody else who can take my shift, something like that. So I don't need to go and, guns a-blazing, but I do need to have a conversation and get those things taken care of. So it might be if I sent in a proposal to my pastor or to my boss and it got criticized, well, I might feel defensive or I might feel angry. But the positive action there is to take that criticism, integrate it into the proposal, revise it, make it better, and then resubmit. So, or if it's physiological, sometimes the positive action is just go take a nap or go to bed an extra hour early or something like that, eat a Snickers, whatever it might be. So, and then, there are times when emotions need to just be listened to or just be verbalized and not really acted on. Sometimes it's enough to say, I'm frustrated or I'm disappointed. And there's not really anything that you can do to fix that, but just verbalizing it, especially to a good friend, the talking cure, can make you feel tremendously better. If you have emotions that are obviously being triggered by idolatry or misplaced priorities, or if you can't find a positive action, or if the only thing you can do is just to wait and see how things play out, sometimes you just got to verbalize it. Listen to the emotions, but just kind of take a deep breath, pause, and let it play out. It doesn't always take a big action. Sometimes the act of waiting is all that's required. So I know that's a lot, and there are so many different emotions that could be talked about, and I'm no psychologist, but these are principles that have been incredibly helpful for me, just in understanding and identifying emotions and then figuring out what am I supposed to do with them. So I hope I hope all that's been helpful to you all too.
I know it's been extremely helpful for me, Tyler. I've really enjoyed hearing you share this. I think you have a few little closing bullet points for us that would probably be helpful.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I've learned is that my kids are little. My oldest is 7. So talking with my kids about their emotions, sometimes I don't get very far. Sometimes, you ask a deep probing question and all you get is I don't know. And just to realize that that's okay, that's still teaching and training and helping them to learn just by asking the questions, because that gives them a framework for how am I going to deal with this later on. So be patient with them, be patient with yourself. In fact, one of the best things that you can do is model this in front of them. If you're having an emotion, process it out loud in front of them. And that might be super embarrassing, but man, can you imagine growing up and seeing your parents do that in front of you and figure out how to take any emotion that they're experiencing and find a positive action? I mean, that's not something that most of us grew up with. But what a gift we can give to our kids if we can teach them how to do that. And also, we need to be particularly mindful for those of us who have a tendency towards being critical, and I'll claim guilty on that one. Be on the lookout for good things in our kids, not just idols, not just sin, not just problems. When you see them happy, process happy emotions with them. When you see them dancing in the living room for no particular reason, process that with them too, and give them positive feedback. Ask why they're so happy, and let them know that, hey, it's all right to have these kinds of emotions, because by the time they get to middle school, everyone's already telling them emotions aren't cool. you know you need to do something to let them know, yes, emotions are good, they're gifts from God. And as parents, sometimes we can be really quick to just put the hammer on something, but it's important that we ask questions more than we tell them what they ought to think or do or feel. That we listen before we pass any kind of judgment, because that's a real quick way to shut down conversation. So just remember that your kids are developing a worldview, and your job is not to fix them, but you need to help process things with them and to build the kind of relationship where that's possible. The relationship is usually more important than whatever the issue is. And in terms of that, just being patient, recognize sometimes you have to deal with the trigger before you can get to the root problem. If you've got a 6-year-old who is just hangry and ridiculous because he is hungry and wants something to eat, you're not going to be able to process that emotion with him until he's had lunch. Get the sandwich in his tummy first, then have the conversation. Just be patient. It doesn't all have to happen right away.
Tyler, thank you for walking through these steps with us. This is extremely helpful, and it's great to know as homeschool parents that we have even more opportunities to help our kids to process emotions and to model that with them, because we're with them more hours of the day. So we know this video is going to be a huge blessing to the homeschool parents out there. So those of you watching, we'd love to hear feedback from you. You can leave comments on the YouTube video. If you have any questions, you can leave those too. Share it with people that you think would benefit from it. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll be back with you again next month for another hangout.
Thanks, Jimmy.